all throughout history, there's countless examples of how authoritarians try to control information to control the people. But once the information gets out there, they're just not able to do that. And of course, it's getting harder and harder for them to do that in the information age, as we're all on smartphones and connected on Twitter and social media. And of course, that's why you hear things like the Twitter files, where the governments are working directly with social media companies to censor us. But problems come to solutions. So as those problems continue to mount, as the state continues to try to squeeze harder to hold us hostage, if you will, new technologies are being created. So that's what I want to talk about. Now, if we look at recent decades, we can see that they've been primarily driven by closed systems, right? Both information and monetary. We're going to look at both of those. And if you think about it, actually, to go to a little bit of a philosophical level, money is just information. My good friend Robert Breedlove has a podcast called What is Money? And he talks about what money is. And so a lot of people think they know what money is, but you've never really thought about it from a philosophical level. But money is just communication. Money communicates value. If I want to get this thing from you, you say you want $10. If I value that more than I value the $10 that I have, I will give you that money, and it communicates that I value that. It's an exchange of value. So anyway, information, money is information, and it communicates value. So anyway, we've seen that basically. Let's start with the financial system. So the financial system, as we know it, is a closed system. As a matter of fact, banks and brokerages operate as basically a permissioned ledger. So if you want to go to a bank account, you have to obviously get permission. You have to fill out all types of paperwork to do that. Opening accounts with institutions is a permissioned activity. They have to decide if they want to allow you to do that. Of course, even sending your own money from your own bank account to somebody else is also a permissioned activity, and they can decide if they want to allow you to move that money or not. What a lot of people found out is that the money in the bank is not your money, not legally. Legally, the bank owes you the money. That's a big difference legally, which means they have the right to decide whether they want to transmit that money. PayPal, Venmo, but even your own bank. I get stumped all the time. I get asked all the time by my bank, do they want to allow me to send that wire? And those are permissioned activities. We see that all the time. Now, the internet also, it started out very open and decentralized, and a lot of people think the internet still is decentralized, which most of it is, right? I mean, obviously we can publish stuff and share information across the internet, but most of it has been consolidated and centralized into what we'd consider these silos, right? So Twitter has this big silo, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, things like that, and those are closed networks. So in order to join Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, Twitter, I have to have permission. In order to use that, I have to have permission. All my activity is permissioned. If I say something that they don't like, then I lose permission. I lose my entire account. So all of that's permissioned. And even sending information between the platforms isn't even allowed. It's not even possible. But today, we have new technologies that are changing all of that. This is a massive paradigm shift. We have open monetary protocols. Of course, I talk about Bitcoin, right, all the time. It's the emergence of a newer open information protocol that we can transfer value. But then we also have other information protocols. And this is one I've talked about a little bit before, but I just continue to get more and more excited about. And you might have heard about it. It's called Nostr, N-O-S-T-R. And basically, between these open monetary protocols and open information protocols, it's challenging the state. Just like the printing press challenged the state, now the internet started to challenge the state, which it already has. Like I said, it's already been responsible for organizing revolutions in Iran and in Egypt and so forth. But now the states tried to figure out how to grasp that. But today, with the monetary protocols, the information protocols, it's going to challenge the state, and they're not going to stand a chance. So let's talk about this. So money, like I said, money's been closed source. You have to have permission. Now, about 8 billion people in the world today, and about 2 billion adults don't have access to banking. They either don't have access to it, they can't afford it, or they don't have permission to join, right? You have this global network of interconnected banks that allow you to send money, but if you don't have permission to join, you can't get into the financial system. Or if you find yourself like Iran or Russia, where you're sanctioned and kicked out of the financial system, you don't have permission to operate. Now, we've seen all types of development, technology happening, supposedly all these fintech companies. And what they've done is developed layers on top of traditional banking rails. And so again, you have Venmo or Cash App or something like that. But Venmo connects to your credit card, which connects to your bank, right? So it's an app and it's cool and it makes it easier, whatever, to send money back and forth. But the reality is it just still works on top of the banking layer. All right. Now, it like I said, makes it easier, makes it faster, but it doesn't change anything. It's still the same permissioned bank account. Now, when you want to get outside of that permissioned area, it become a real big problem. So, for example, try sending money to another country that uses a different siloed money system. So, send money to El Salvador. See what happens. See how that works. Especially try it with a very small transaction, and you'll find out most of the times it's probably not worth it because of the high percentage of fees that people pay. According to the World Bank, the average fee percentage on a remittance payment, so that's sending money to somebody else in another country, is 6.5%. Now, if you're doing it directly to banks, the fee percentage is usually about 12%. It's a big chunk. It's a real big chunk. And what we also saw from that same report, 76% of people have an account at a bank. And so that means 25% of people don't. They don't have an account at the bank. They're not in the global financial system. Now, I've often said that the smartphone is like the great equalizer. If you have access to a smartphone, you have access to the internet, you can learn anything, you can meet anyone, you can do anything. You can be a kid with an Instagram account, make $100,000, but not if you're not allowed to be in the financial system. You have to be in the financial system, otherwise you have no chance. Now, a lot of people aren't really aware of this from a global perspective. A lot of people approach this from a very U.S.-centric viewpoint, but think about it like this. What about all the refugees that are fleeing Ukraine or have fled Syria or they fled Venezuela? What about all those people? They've left, they have war-torn regions. They don't have IDs. They don't even have a path to get an ID. Their country's gone. They can't even go home and get an ID. So what are they going to do? How are they going to join the financial system? Of course, the answer is they won't. However, those same people, they don't have an ID. They won't have permission to open a bank account, but they have a smartphone. As a matter of fact, over 86% of the people in the world today have a smartphone. 7.1 billion people have a smartphone globally, and that is what will change things. If you think about the world globally, all right, you have to think globally. If you're going to make it, you got to think globally because we're moving into this decentralized revolution. And if you understand technology, you understand like in the United States, the internet grew really fast because we had this wired telephone system. And then the internet was able to work off of that wired telephone system. If you remember the old days of the internet, it was a dial-up, right? It worked on the phone system. But then you had nations like Africa that leapfrog past the US. They didn't have wired. They went straight to wireless. And so that's we have to understand the global perspective, the global picture. And so sort of the same thing, if we're looking at it from a very US-centric viewpoint, we have this US banking system, and that works really well. What do we need a solution for that for? But in other nations across the world, they have big problems, and they're leapfrogging past our existing system and building up a new system. So like I was saying, if we think about this globally, we have all these refugees from all over the world. They don't have IDs. They don't have a path to get IDs. And because of that, they won't be able to get bank accounts. They won't be able to participate in the global financial system. But what was the percentage? But they have smartphones. They have smartphones. Now, if you have a smartphone, then you can participate. We're going to talk about that in a second. But just for some other numbers, if we look at some areas like Nigeria, for example, only 45% of the people have a bank account. In Palestine, only 34% of people have a bank account. That means they can't participate in this global marketplace. Now, according to the World Bank, also 75 countries still have restrictions on women's rights to manage assets. So all you feminists and women's rights out there, 75 countries in the world today still don't allow women to have assets. Why? They don't have permission. Are you getting the point here? The authoritarians, the nation states, they want to control everything, and they want to control who has permission. 75 countries don't allow women to have permission over their money. Now, like I said, a lot of people aren't really aware of these situations, why I want to kind of bring this up. But all of these people have access to smartphones. Now, from a society level, You might go, well, there are some people we don't want to have bank accounts, I guess, right? Like some people might, we should probably shut them off. Like we can see back through history, companies that have been debanked, Operation Choke Point under the Obama administration. They started shutting down legal operations, access to banking, if they did online gambling or gun stores, things like that. We saw WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks was shut down from its payment processor. If you were protesting in Canada, for example, under the trucker protest, you got your bank account shut down. And you can see that if you just do the wrong thing. Now, they were doing supposedly something that was constitutionally protected, such as the right to assemble, and people donated money to a GoFundMe and got their accounts frozen. So you have to understand, you always want to stay open to this, because even though you might like a law or a policy going into effect, you have to think about how it could be used against you. Because unfortunately, once that law goes into place, it can be used against you. And the world's so divided, there's always going to be somebody on the other side of the aisle from you.